Welcome to this episode of Out of the Best Books, the podcast where we deep dive into classic literature and have conversations about what we've learned and discovered along the way. We love all things books and reading, and we want to share our love of the classics with you. We hope to inspire you to read along with us and join in the conversation. I'm Amity.
And I'm Laura. Let's get started. Right.
Okay.
I feel like we start every episode with, all right.
I know. All right. Or okay.
We're picking up Wind in the Willows, which is like been so delightful for me.
Yes. And a new discovery because it's one of the children's classics that I have not read before. And I'm not totally sure why. It's always been on my to be read with my kids, but it just hasn't happened yet. There's been others that. So one thing that I've done over the years, kind of crazy side note about why we haven't read it yet. I will pull out several books, or I'll let my kids go and choose several books that we have in a pile of to be read. And then we vote on the one that we're going to read next. So everybody kind of has a say. So it's never gotten voted in.
They're probably like, no, I don't know. Just not, the title isn't appealing.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. But it's never gotten voted in. So, but after reading it, I'm like, this is such a beautiful and important one. So it's going to make it into the rotation pretty soon. Okay.
I would have to wait for a long time though, because it's pretty mature in like the language. And so, like even me, sometimes I'll read a paragraph a couple of times and go, not quite sure what he's saying.
Do you ever just start reading it and go, okay, people like 100 years ago were so, even like really, really poor, supposedly not as well educated people were like more sophisticated than we are today.
Yeah. Like did somebody sit and read this easily and kids could listen to it easily and understand what the story? I mean, it's hard. I'm new to this, but it's.
Yeah, no, I think that they did. Like, that's why I think there's a lot of the children's books that I'm like, I don't know how a little kid would necessarily read it by themselves and understand it. But
a genius. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think maybe my Audrey could understand this, but
oh yeah.
About it in my house.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't know at my house who would understand it just reading it by themselves.
It's funny. Often, so we got a Nintendo Switch, and Audrey usually likes to spend like all of her time in her bedroom. But since we've got this Nintendo Switch, it's downstairs. And so she's been out a lot more, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And so like last night I was reading and I was like to David and her, I was like, what do you think this word means? And she just knew. And I was like, okay, well.
Isn't that awesome though? Because it's like, oh, look, we don't have to teach our kid like everything. We don't have to put everything into their brain in order for them to know lots of things. And my goal is for my kids to be smarter than I am. And so it's kind of a relief when things like that happen.
Well, like at 16,
yeah,
at 16, she knows more words than I do. So there you go.
That's awesome. Yeah, she just had a birthday, right?
Yeah, she turned 16 last week. So she's
cool. That's crazy.
Crazy. Okay, so let's jump in with chapter 5.
Yeah, chapter 5, Wind in the Willows. So the past several years, we've been learning lots of different Latin and Greek phrases in our homeschool. And so when I first saw the title for this, I was like, oh, it's Latin. So the title is Dulce Domum. And it just means sweetly at home. And anybody who knows even just a little bit of like Spanish or even Italian would see that word and think, oh yeah, sweet, dulce or dulce or whatever, or dulce, and say, yeah, that means sweet. And they're all Latin-based languages anyway. So the original Latin means is dulce domum, meaning sweetly at home. and which is a perfect and very fitting title for this wonderful chapter. Okay, so we are back with Rat and Mole, and what we find out is that they have been out on an outing with Otter. Otter is such kind of a funny character because he jumps in and out. He never has like tons of time spent on him, but he's an important character. And they've been out with Otter. They've been hunting and exploring, and they're making their way back through the valleys and everything. They're walking by sheep and trying to get back home. But it seems like they're not super familiar with the area that they're walking through because Mole says things like, "It looks like we're coming to a village." And Rat is like, "Well, it's okay because all the people are inside. You know, the animals didn't necessarily like to mingle with humans so much, even though this is a really funny story because the humans and the animals really are like, it's like they are kind of contemporaries. You almost get the impression they're like the same size as the humans, and we'll talk more about that later. So anyway, Rat's like, it's okay if we're walking by a village because the people are all inside.
Can I tell you a funny story about this? So
Yes.
like they talk about it like he's like they're watching a theater. So like
Mhm.
the people are inside and the people are unaware they're being watched, but they're just going about doing what they're doing. And the animals are just like, I think it's very interesting. So I wanted to tell you the story about when Charlie was like 8 or 9 years old. We were talking about a peeping Tom or
Mm.
something. And Charlie goes, I've always wanted to be a peeping Tom. We were like, and I think one of his grandmas was with us, and it was the rest of us. And we kind of looked at him funny and we go, do you know what a peeping Tom is? And he was like, kind of acted like, oh, I don't know. And we told him what a peeping Tom does. And he goes, oh, no, 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 I didn't want to do that. He's like, I just wanted to watch people make brownies or something. And we like
That's so cute.
have laughed about that like since so he's 22, so it's been like 15, 13 years. But my husband said the funny thing is you guys didn't understand that he was totally joking. So I don't know if he was joking,
Yeah,
but we thought it was really funny. He's like,
that
I just
is
want to watch
really
people
funny.
make brownies. We're like, why would you want to watch people make brownies? That's really weird.
It's just so funny because, yeah, I mean, you don't know if he was joking or not, but you just never really know how kids translate the things that we say. Like, they form this whole bunch of meaning around these phrases and things that we say and things that we do, and they can be way off of reality, but it's really pretty hilarious and awesome. I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank heavens he did not grow up to be a peeping Tom. So we're good.
Yeah. They're walking along and like you say, they see the people inside and they're doing things obviously completely unaware that they're being observed. They see a bird in a cage in one of the windows. Then they get beyond the village. So Mole's thinking about dinner. Rat is just kind of thinking about getting home. Rat is so fixed on the straight gray road that he did not notice poor Mole when suddenly the summons reached him and took him like an electric shock. So Mole stops dead in his tracks, his nose searching hither and thither in its effort to recapture the fine filament. Basically, and it talks about how animals have this other sense that we as humans just don't have. But Mole knows that his home is nearby, which makes us go, oh, wow, he hasn't been back to his little hole in the ground for now, like probably a couple years, because this has taken place over quite a long period of time. It talks about going through a couple of different seasons, well, several different seasons. And he knows in that instant that when that electric shock takes him over, he knows that it's his home kind of beckoning to him. He has this sense that it's nearby. It talks about how he hadn't really even given his home a thought since he left it a long time before. And we're not, like I said, not totally sure how long. I guarantee if we went through with a very fine tooth comb, we could probably figure out exactly how long it had been. But so he calls out to Rat and he says, Ratty, hold on, come back. I want you quick. And at this point, Rat, he's so just kind and cheerful and good all the time. But I get the impression as I was reading it, I was like, it's sort of like as a parent, when you're like desperately trying to get home and your toddler's like, look at this rock. And you're like, neat, let's go home, you know? And so, and Rat kind of gives that impression. He's like, come on, we got to get going. Like, let's get to where we're going. Let's not keep stopping. And Mole is like, please stop. You don't understand. It's my home. I've just come across the smell of it and it's close by. But when he said that, Rat was too far ahead to hear him. So Mole thinks that he's ignoring him. Rat just totally didn't hear him. He's just like far along. He's like, come on, you know, like, let's keep going. And so Mole is just completely like downcast and so sad. He's like, you know, I admire Rat so much, but he doesn't even care about my home. But so I guess it probably just doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
Uh,
did you mention I'm sorry, David was bugging me. Did
oh,
you
go ahead.
mention that rat is worried about snow?
Oh, no, that's an important thing.
So
Yes.
yes, that's what I was thinking about with parenting.
Hmm.
So the kids are like, "No, I want to do this. I want to do this," and you're like, "No, the snow is coming. We need to
Yeah.
get home." Or, you know, say school is starting in 10 minutes. Like, what
Yeah.
are you doing? Or
Yeah.
whatever. So
Totally.
yeah,
Like he has this sort of um higher view of the reason that they need to get to where they're going, kind of like a parent. We've got an appointment. We've got this. Um,
yeah, and he smells that the snow is coming.
yeah.
There's
He
another
smells,
example.
yes, he smells that the snow is coming, and Mole smells that his home is nearby.
Yes.
So they just keep going along, and finally Rat stops and he's like, look here, Mole chap, you seem dead tired. No talk left in you and your feet dragging like lead. We'll sit down here for a minute and rest. And after a while, it comes out that Mole is like, well, my home is nearby. And I really wanted to stop and see it. And Rat is just like, oh, well, okay, we better get going, you know? And Mole's like, well, okay. And Rat is like, no, we're going to your home. And Mole really like sort of, you know, downplays his home. He's like, it's a dingy place. I know that and everything. It's not good enough for you. It's not nearly as nice as your house or Badger's house, but it's my home, you know? And Rat is just like, yeah, like let's go. I've been a total pig. Let's get to your house. And Mole's like, no, 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 come back, Ratty. It's no good. I'll tell you, it's too late and too dark, and the place is too far off. The snow is coming, and I never meant to let you know I was feeling that way about it. So, but but it doesn't matter. Rat is like, no, no, no. Like, this is important. It's important to you, so it's important to me. And it's another little glimpse that we get into Rat's character that's how he is. He's like, he's not so stuck on himself and what he thinks is important that he's unwilling to see other things that are also important to other people.
Yeah.
So they get to Mole's house, and on Mole's little front door, it says in Gothic lettering, which I love, is written this up in it's painted, it says Mole End. And that's something that I'm kind of curious about too. Like, what is it about the word end that is often associated with like the names of houses, and also the fact that people like always named their houses.
Yeah.
Like I love that. But so I'm not sure
We
why end.
we name our cars. Some of us in my family name our
Okay.
cars. And then like we had to name my computer today because we were setting it up. I'm like, I mean, but I guess I think of like a house that has a name as being like big and important. I don't know.
Hmm.
That's just funny. Like, what would you name your house?
I think
I
you'd
don't
have to
know.
live in it for a while in order to like give it a name.
That's just funny.
But it's also kind of awesome. Like, because that's another thought that I had as I was reading through here and I wrote it down, is just the houses are kind of extra slash bonus characters in this whole book because they each are very distinct. They kind of have their own personality. Some are cozy and sweet, and others are just large and imposing and cold and like toads. And they Well, I can think of Toad Hall and Mole's End. I don't know if Badgers
Badger's house, it's like, it's
is the
underground and it's warm. Like they had that area in the kitchen where the fire was going, and it's big,
yeah,
but it's also
yes,
big, but like safe and
yeah,
comfortable.
very safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that. I was just trying to think if there's a name for it, but I think all they see when they go to his house, it just says Badger on the door.
Yeah.
And then we know that Rat's house is nice and clean and comfortable.
Yeah. It's funny how
Um,
they have all those, like, so they get to the door, and Rat can tell from the outside that Mole really takes pride in his house by like the statues that are out there and like
Mhm.
the decorations that are hanging. And anyways,
Yeah, yeah, he does. Uh, on the walls hung wire baskets with ferns in them. Yeah, he's obviously put a lot of thought into the decor,
yeah.
especially like on the outside, which is what they can see immediately. And then they go into the house and Mole is like so happy to be there. But after all these other animals' houses that he's seen, he's like, oh, I should never have brought you here. Like, this is so just shabby and ordinary, and Rat, I love, love, love Rat here. He says, so it says the rat paid no heed to his doleful self reproaches. He was running here and there, opening doors, inspecting rooms and cupboards, lighting lamps and candles, and sticking them up everywhere. So he runs into this house that hasn't had anybody there for quite a while. And he immediately goes about like making it even better than it already was. But at the same time, like not being like, oh, this isn't good enough. He's making it even more homey. Like, oh, we're here now. We're going to make it very livable. And he says, what a capital little house this is. So compact, so well planned, everything here and everything in its place. And like, what better compliment could you give? And, a mole's house is obviously not going to be very big anyway. It's underground. It's going to be a lot smaller and maybe more tight, but he's very complimentary in how it's all laid out and thought out. Well, they quickly realize that there's no food in the house. There's like some things that can last a long time, like cheese and wine, I believe. But other than that, there's really nothing. Oh, and I think they find some sardines. There we go. And a German sausage.
Yeah.
There
A
it is.
tin of sardines, a box of Captain's biscuits nearly full, and a German sausage
Yeah.
encased in silver paper.
Yeah. So all things that could last a long time and be just fine. And that's all there is in the house. And Mole is feeling bad. He's like, there's no feast for you. And Rat's like, look at this. This is great. This is a great feast.
Yeah. And then he goes down in the cellar and gets some beer.
Yeah.
It's funny just because Mole's like, there's no food. And Rat's like, look at all the food we have. Like, this isn't no food.
Yeah. Yeah. Just really making the very best of the situation and seeing the value and the goodness of it. And he even sits down and says, tell me all about how you made your house what it is. He's really giving him uh credence. He's like, you've done well. Tell me how you did it. It probably helps Mole to be like, oh, I am intelligent. I've done something that is, what's the word? I'm competent according to Rat, and that's a huge confidence builder. So this is so cute because as they're going about scurrying about like getting their food and things like that, they suddenly hear this like shuffling outside. And this is when we realize that it's Christmas time. And this is really sweet because the field mice have come to carol at Mole's door. Excuse me. And this is something that they do like every year. There's this big group of field mice and they go around singing carols to everybody. And Rat is like super excited about it. Let's
Yeah. And
see.
Mole's like, well, I think he's excited until he opens the door. And then he's like, oh, usually I give them like a hot drink and some food. And if I can afford it, I feed them dinner. And he's like, well, we don't have anything here.
Yeah. Yeah. But Rat's like, well, let's have a look at him, and it's all they're I mean, the way they describe it, they're just all just so cute. And they begin singing this song. And if I remember right, I remember reading about how they basically write a new carol for each year. Did I read that right?
Oh
I think
gosh.
so. Oh, let's see. They sing one of the old time carols that their forefathers composed in fields that were fallow and held by frost. So yeah, it was their ancestors that um wrote these carols. And it's such a cute carol. I think I don't want to like read the whole thing, but maybe we should just like add it in the show notes or whatever because
Okay.
it's so cute. And you can just kind of imagine it as you read through it, you can imagine it set to like a very traditional Christmas carol-y sounding tune. Really cute. So Rat is very complimentary to them and he takes them aside. Well, Mole's like, everybody come inside, he's basically like, I don't have anything for you. But Rat takes some of them aside and he's like, are any of the shops open? I said, well, yeah, the shops are open later this time of year, which is not what we do now. Everything closes earlier at Christmas time. It's fine. Um, and so he gives him like several orders, and the field mouse takes off and goes to get all these little things, all these goodies and drinks and things to bring back so everybody can feast like they usually do. He's like really talking at the field. This is a long chapter.
Yeah.
Um, he's like really talking at the field mice. He's like, they're actors too. They're so sweet.
He tries to get one of them to like perform from the play that they had just done, and
Yeah.
the mouse won't do it.
Yeah. He just stands there just completely frozen. He can't do anything. And so like, okay, well, we won't do that.
That's like today with Presley when she tried to give a talk at church and she got up there and she was really excited to go to church and like give the talk. And then we get up
Yeah.
there and she wouldn't say a word. So we always say have you seen I can't, because of content, I can't recommend this movie, but have you ever seen Four Christmases with Reese Witherspoon and that big guy's name? Anyways, when I'm talking to you, I can't remember names or words.
Four Christmases. I have never seen that.
So he talks a lot. And
Okay.
then a camera gets on him and he like turns into a puddle of nothing and he can't say anything. And
Oh my
so
gosh.
that's what Presley does.
That's really funny.
Like,
Okay, I just pulled it up. Vince Vaughn.
yeah.
Okay.
It's not it's the most hilarious movie in the whole world, but it's not appropriate. So I'm
Not
just
very nice. Okay.
telling you,
Okay.
don't judge me.
No judgment. Not at all.
But it is hilarious. But yeah, he's like, so they're trying to go on a trip like to a tropical place so they can avoid their families at Christmas because otherwise they have to go to four families Christmases. And they get like snowed in or something. And so the camera comes on him and he's just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Anyways, can't
Yes,
make
that
any
is,
words.
yeah, I think that's exactly how these
Yes.
field mice are because it talks about how they totally put on plays all the time, but all of a sudden, for this stranger that they don't know, he's just completely frozen. He can't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the food shows up from the town, and Rat busies himself making sure that everybody has what they need, and there's cheerful conversation and good food, and it's just a wonderful evening. And then Rat is just ready to drop. He's so tired. And again, he's like so complimentary to Mole. He's like, everything's where it needs to be. This is great. I'm going to be comfortable and sleep well. This is fine. He says, what a ripping little house this is. Everything's so handy. Oh, and Mole is also very, very tired. But I love this. He lays down and has his head on the pillow in great joy and contentment. But ere he closed his eyes, he let them wander round his old room, mellow in the glow of the firelight that played or rested on familiar and friendly things which had long been unconsciously a part of him, and now smilingly received him back without rancor. And so he's just like, he kind of left and forgot about all of it, but it's there and it's beautiful and it's home and he loves it. And it's such a peaceful, wonderful and welcoming place. And he's so happy to be there. And I love that. And like what a wonderful lesson for us to create that kind of home for ourselves and for our children, that even, if it's a long span of time between when our children come back, my children haven't left the house yet, but we're getting there. Like we're going to be there before I know it, that just when they come back to my home, wherever it may be, they feels so comfortable and like it's a place of peace and love, and that they can just, it's sort of a little haven and escape from the world. So,
Yeah. And you don't have to have like the most expansive,
no,
expensive, wonderful house for it to be cozy and comfortable, you know?
yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah.
And I love this kind of just a final phrase. He talks about the house and it being the special, it's there is a special value of some such anchorage in one's existence. So thinking of a home as sort of your anchor, like yes, you go out and you explore the world, but you have this home that's an anchor. And that's really beautiful.
Yes. And
So
I also love that Rat worked so hard to like just moles like a basket case, and Rat's just like, we got this. I got this covered, you know. And I think of
yeah.
about it as like being a, you know, say I am hosting a party, or like one of my kids graduated or something. I'm hosting a party. I'm like entertaining, right? I'm talking to people and stuff. And my sisters and my mom are like behind me, cleaning up, putting food out. Like that was Rat's
Yeah.
role, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just so nice when you have family and friends
Oh,
like that that
yeah.
are
That
just,
are that way. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. And
wonderful.
yeah,
So thank you, Mom and Amanda and Emily.
I know. That's a huge, huge compliment. Be that kind of person in somebody's life. It's
Yeah.
so much value.
So chapter 6, I love Mr. Toad. Like,
And the thing, what I love about it is like every other chapter, we get Mr. Toad again.
yeah.
Like we get the sweet, peaceful stories with Rat and Mole and Badger, and then it's like Mr. Toad.
Yes.
Here he is.
Crazy Mr. Toad. And I also like so we were in mid-December, now we're in early spring. So we
Mhm.
always jumping up like a
Yes.
few months or whatever. But so Rat and Mole are like just enjoying breakfast, trying to figure out what they're going to do for the day. And there's a knock at the door, and it's Mr. Badger. They're kind of surprised that he showed up. And it says, "This was a wonderful thing indeed that the Badger should pay a formal call on them, or indeed on anybody." Because remember, he doesn't like to visit with
He is
people.
not social.
Yes. He generally had to be caught if you wanted him badly, as he slipped quietly along a hedgerow of an early morning or late evening, or else hunted up in his own house in the middle of the wood, which was a serious undertaking. So he just doesn't come out much. And what he says when he gets there is, "The hour has come. I said when winter was over, we were going to go deal with Toad, and today's the day." So Badger had heard that a new car was arriving that day. So he's like, for Toad, it's like perfect day to go take care of this problem. And he said, "At this very moment, perhaps Toad is busy arraying himself in those singularly hideous, is that habiliments so dear to him." So he's like dressing himself up in these hideous clothes, right? Which transform him from a comparatively good looking toad into an object which throws any decent minded animal that comes across it into a violent fit. So,
So horrifying.
yes, he's getting dressed in these hideous clothes that turn him from like a good looking toad into this monster behind the wheel of a car. And he's like, "We better hurry." And it's up to the three of us to go rescue him. So they agree. And again, they're walking to Toad Hall in a line because of their animal etiquette that they walk in single line. It says, instead of sprawling all across the road and being of no use or support to each other in case of any sudden danger. So they walk in a line, right? To like be aware of what's going on. They're
Mhm.
animals.
Mhm.
They have to be aware. So they get there, and there's of course a new car in the drive. And Toad comes out wearing goggles, cap, gaiters, an enormous overcoat, and he's swaggering down the steps, putting on his gloves. So Badger was right. He's ready to go. So, and Toad invites them, just like before. He's like, "Why don't you come along with me?" And then he notices their expressions on their faces, but that's probably not why they've come to see him.
So funny.
Yes. So Badger tells Rat and Mole to take Toad inside, and he orders the chauffeur to put the car back. Like, we're not taking that out today. And then he tells Toad to take off his ridiculous clothes, and Toad, of course, refuses. So he tells Rat and Mole to go take them off of him, which is really, I mean, can you imagine how that would go?
No, no. Yeah, Badger is definitely one of these just like no nonsense. Doesn't like it says that he's not social and he's actually somewhat antisocial. He's like very kind, but does not think at all of how some of his actions may come across. So,
That's funny. We just saw yesterday, we went and saw a man called Otto. And that's
yeah.
like Tom Hanks was excellent. And that's how it's kind of like, I mean, he wasn't a mean guy. I mean, he was, but he just like, he has these things he needs to get done and he
Mhm.
doesn't think about what other people.
Bowl everybody over.
Yes, that's just
Mm.
funny. So they had to lay, it says they had to lay Toad on the floor, kicking and calling all sorts of names before they could get to work properly. Then the rat had to sit on him, and Mole got his clothes off of him bit by bit. And they stand him up on his legs. This is just like a great visual.
It's like dressing and undressing a toddler.
Yes. And like, oh, another funny thing is Toad laughs because he knows what they're doing. He's giggling. He's like a toddler or a, might I say, 5-year-old that's like, I know what you're doing and this is not gonna work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now that he was merely Toad and no longer the terror of the highway, he giggled feebly and looked from one to the other appealingly, seeming quite to understand the situation. So he knows what they're doing. Yeah, I think by laughing, he's like, yeah, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
You can try.
yeah. I mean, it's totally like the kids. So then Badger tells Toad that he should be ashamed of like spending his father's money like he has. A few things: ruining all the animals' reputations, crashing his car, fighting the police. Like he just lists all these things that Toad has done. Um, and then he takes him into to the smoking room to talk. So he's like, "We're coming. We're going in this room. We're gonna have
Yeah.
a longer talk."
Yeah.
And
And you kind of get the idea. It's sort of like an interrogation room and he is like what do you call it? Just sort of the master interrogator. He's the
yes,
muscle that's going to get it out of him. And
and Rat says, "This is never gonna work." Like the other Rat and Mole are probably like, "Okay, I don't think this is working." After they just fought him on the floor to get the clothes off of him. Oh my gosh. Um, so Rat and Mole are outside listening and they hear Toad sobbing. And then 45 minutes later, they come out and Badger says, "Oh, this is great. Toad has vowed that he's going to give up cars forever." And Mole says, "That's great." And Rat is kind of like, Rat first says, "Very good news indeed." And then he said, "If only, if only."
Mhm.
I don't believe this. Um, and then Badger tells Toad that he needs to apologize to his friends. And Toad then backtracks on what he has just told Badger. And he says, "Wait, I'll say anything under pressure."
Yeah, he's like, that's what I said in there. I was going to say anything in there. It's like, well, at least you're honest.
That's right.
And he's like, you're so eloquent, dear Badger, and so moving and so convincing. I put all your points so frightfully well. So he's like, I just, I bought into everything you said. It was like, yes, it makes you think of like a revival meeting or something where everybody's just like, yes, praise Jesus, I'm gonna change all my ways. Then they leave the meeting and
And
it's
they
like,
walk
okay.
out the door.
Yeah,
Forget.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
He says, "I've been searching my mind since and going over things in it, and I find that I'm not a bit sorry or repentant, really. So it's no earthly good saying I am, now is it?" He says, "I can't promise to never touch a car again. I can only promise that I'm going to drive off in the first car I see." I mean, yeah. So Rat was right. He said to the Mole, "Told you so, didn't I? I
mhm.
told you this wasn't going to work." So then Badger decides, well, we're going to have to just stay and supervise him and make sure he doesn't get into a car. And so they decide that they're going to take shifts and watch him. Let's
Yeah, and they're
see.
all just kind of like invited themselves to live at Toad Hall. until further notice and until Toad is cured,
Yeah, until
basically.
he's convinced, right? And he's like, so they take him upstairs and lock him in the bedroom. And they promise him this is going to be fun once you're over the initial like panic
Yeah.
or he calls it a painful attack. Then this is going to be fun. He says, we'll take great care of everything for you till you're well. And we'll see your money isn't wasted as it has been. No more of those regrettable incidents with the police. And no more weeks in the hospital being ordered about by female nurses.
Yeah.
So, what I think is funny is it's like Toad wants power by being behind the car, the wheel of a
Right.
car. But really, or freedom and power, that's what he's like seeking. But really, when he is behind the wheel of the car and he gets in a car accident or he like has to pay a fine or he ends up in jail, maybe he loses the power and freedom. So that's like to me, like being in the hospital, being ordered about by female nurses is like the worst thing that could happen to
Yeah.
him. They lock him in the room, and then Toad is yelling at them through the keyhole that they're, anyways, that he's upset with them. Okay, so when he first goes in there, he starts arranging the car. He's driving them nuts because he is arranging the chairs in the shape of a car and pretending to drive it. So he's just being, what's the word? Obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is supposed to be like an intervention. Like the car is like a drug, like
Yeah.
somebody who's going through a drug. So he's going through those stages of withdrawals, I think.
Yes.
So then he goes from being obnoxious to being depressed. And then Rat goes, it must be the next one morning, Rat goes in to relieve Badger, who wants to go on a walk outside. And Badger warns Rat that Toad cannot be trusted, which we're going to find out he totally cannot be trusted. He says, now you look out, Rat. When Toad's quiet and submissive and playing at being the hero of a Sunday school prize, then he's at his artfulest. There's sure to be something up. I know him. Well, I must be off. So he's like, you better watch him, but I'm leaving. And
Yeah.
Mole goes with him. So they both leave. So Rat makes the mistake of telling Toad that Badger and Mole have left and gone out. Then Toad goes into this like acting spree where he's like, I can't get out of bed. I'm not going to be around much longer. Like he's like, this is going to kill me. I'm going to die. But he hates to be a nuisance. I mean, this is just totally an act, right? Like,
Yes.
I just don't want to be a nuisance. Oh, it's probably too late to get a doctor in here. Like, I have no energy to get up. And Rat doesn't think he's bad enough to need a doctor at first. But then Toad says, well, I'm nearing the end, so you might want to get a lawyer too. And that's, I think,
like amping it up,
yes. I think that's what freaks Rat out. Like, oh no, he must be really, I mean, he's telling me he needs a lawyer. He must be really bad. This must be worse than I think. I better go get a lawyer. So he goes to get a doctor and a lawyer, right? He leaves, which is exactly what Toad wanted him to do. So as soon as he leaves, Toad gets dressed. He ties his sheets together to make a rope and he climbs out of his window and goes the opposite way that Rat went.
Mm-hmm.
So Mole and Badger get back and they're scolding him for what's happened. And even Mole is judgmental, like, which isn't like him, right?
No, it's not.
This is what he says. You've been a bit of a duffer this time, Ratty. Toad, too, of all animals. And then Rat says, he did it awfully well. I love this. Badger said, he did you awfully well.
Yeah.
That reminds me of like, my husband always says that, like, Presley's got my number.
Yeah.
And he's always like, no, it's just you. Like, you're the only one that will give her whatever she wants. And like,
You
yeah. So,
know,
yeah,
that's so funny.
she does me awfully well. And Badger says they need to stay there because there's no telling how Toad's going to return. He could be on a stretcher. He could be drug in by the police. Like, just have no idea. So we switch over to Toad. He's walking miles away from home. And he keeps switching his direction in case somebody's following him. So he's just kind of wandering out in the wherever, trying to get away. He thinks he's done something amazing by escaping. And Rat is so dumb because he fell for it. Okay, so he's walking, he sees an inn and he realizes that he's hungry. So he goes inside and orders this huge lunch. And halfway through his lunch, he hears a car outside. The car pulls in and the passengers get out and come into the inn to eat. And he thinks to himself, and I think about this like with addictions, right? What's the harm in just looking at the car?
Just looking at it. Yeah.
For me, it's like, what's one bite's not going to hurt? But one bite turns into the whole piece of pie or the
whole piece of pie.
Yes.
Exactly.
So, yeah, what's the harm in just looking at it? Then he gets out to the car and he's like, I wonder if it will start easily. This is just,
and this is such an important, I feel like there's a few important concepts being approached here because, first of all, like you say, it is the idea of addiction. And there's a podcaster I listen to who's really excellent. He talks about the scorched earth approach and how some people need that. And the scorched earth approach is just basically you get rid of everything that reminds you of it. Like you don't have it in your house. You don't go anywhere near it. Like if you're trying to stop drinking, you don't go to the bar. You don't have any of that in your house. Don't walk down that aisle at Costco. Like whatever it may be, you just completely get rid of everything that may remind you of it. But we see like it's such a powerful thing. Like addiction is no joke at all because even Toad, he's like, and I think this is such an important commentary on it. He's like, oh, I'm not going to take it. I'm just going to look at it. Well, I wonder how easy it would be to turn on and then carry on.
Then before he knows it, he's driving down the road as fast as he can. Like, yeah, it's like, and you think I can handle, like, I try not to eat sweets. Okay. I buy cookies for the kids or for Presley to take in her lunch. And just them being here, it's like, why do I buy them? I mean, they don't need them, but like, if they weren't here, I wouldn't eat them. Anyways, it's just funny. And you think I can handle it. They can be here and I cannot touch them, but
yeah.
Sometimes I can do that and sometimes I can't.
Yeah.
It says as he sped, he knew not whither, fulfilling his instincts, living his hour, reckless of what might come to him. He just doesn't care. He doesn't know where he's going and he's just following his instincts.
And I love how too, it's like a little before that, it's like he found himself somehow seated in the driver's seat. I don't know how that happened. Weird.
He doesn't know how, but yeah, that's how addiction is. It's like, because it's your brain that is like in your body that wants it. And so before you know it, you're partaking and then you're like, I don't know how I got here. Anyways.
Yeah, it's rough stuff.
So later, then he goes to trial.
Yeah.
And yes. And he's found guilty of first stealing a valuable motor car, secondly, driving to the public danger, and thirdly, of gross impertinence to the rural police. I like this too. Mr. Clerk, will you tell us, please, what is the very stiffest penalty we can impose for each of these offenses without, of course, giving the prisoner the benefit of doubt, because there isn't any.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're pretty like harsh. I'm reading this. Yes. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. He gets 20 years in prison.
Yeah.
Let's see. So they chain him up and they drag him through the marketplace for people to like when they're dragging him through there, they're throwing vegetables at him and insulting him. Their innocent faces lit up with the pleasure they ever derive from the sight of a gentleman in difficulties. So I think they like that he's rich and wealthy, and they're enjoying the fact that he's getting in trouble. I kind of think about like, I mean, I don't know that celebrities per se, but like there was just a Real Housewife of Salt Lake that got in trouble for like scamming elderly people. And so I don't know. It's like you get some kind of satisfaction out of watching somebody who's like wealthy And you're like, oh, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like they're not so perfect as everybody
Yeah.
would
The gentleman in difficulty.
have you believe. Yeah.
Yeah, they love seeing a gentleman in difficulties. So basically, he's drugged through the marketplace. Everybody laughs at him and throws things. And then he is put into a dark dungeon. The jailer nodded grimly, laying his withered hand on the shoulder of the miserable Toad. The rusty key creaked in the lock, the great door clanged behind them, and Toad was a helpless prisoner in the remotest dungeon of the best guarded keep of the stoutest castle in all the length of the breadth of merry England.
Pretty pretty dark prospect for sure.
Yes, 20 years in prison.
And there
Anyways,
he is to stay. Or
supposedly.
not.
I know. When we were talking last week, and I was like, I noticed that another chapter was about him, and I was like, wait a second, isn't he in prison? Not
Not
forever.
for long. Yep. So in fact, he'll be out before we end here. So I'm going to go through chapter 7 fairly quickly. I'll probably skip some things, but it's a very extremely important chapter because I kind of think that this is the reason for, well, one of the reasons for the title of the book. So the title of this chapter is The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. So Mole and Rat have been out with Otter. They've like fishing and been on the boat and things like that. And they find out that Otter's little son, his name's Portly, is missing. And at first everybody's like, oh, it's not a big deal. He's probably just like out wandering around adventuring. He does this quite often. And Rat is like, no, like Otter is really worried. And when he gets to the point where he doesn't just worry unnecessarily because he knows his little son and he knows that, he goes off and then he comes back and it's fine. He's like, Otter's really worried because it's been like a few days. And so Rat's like, we need to jump in and help because this is serious at this point. And so, of course, they do. So,
Yeah,
okay. So,
this
Otter,
time's
go ahead.
different, right? This time it's different. Like he's
Yes.
not coming back.
Yes. Yes. And so they are on their boat and they actually see Otter. They've talked to Otter and he's like crouched down watching at this ford where his little boy Portly often plays and he's just watching there and they're just kind of heartsick and Mole is like, I can't just do nothing. Like it may appear like there's nothing we can really do, but I can't just do nothing. And Rat's the same way. He's like, that's just what I was thinking myself. He's like, it's not the sort of night for bed anyway, so let's get going. So they get the boat out and they start going down the river. And I love this too because it talks about how Mole had to steer with judgment because it's dark, like it's the middle of the night actually, and so he had to be very careful how he was steering. But we get the idea that just as in the first chapter, he was completely incompetent where it comes to steering a boat. Now he's amazing. He's really, really good at it, where he just uses his judgment to steer through the river in the dark of night. And Rat has complete faith in him because he's really good at it. All right, so they're going along, and it says, at last, over the rim of the waiting earth, the moon lifted with slow majesty till it swung clear of the horizon and rode off free of moorings, and once more they began to see surfaces, meadows widespread, and quiet gardens, and the river itself from bank to bank, all softly disclosed. And so it's just sort of painting this picture of sort of this like nostalgic, beautiful little place. They tie their boat to a willow, and it says they land in this silent silver kingdom. And I'm sorry if I'm like reading some of this. It's just like it's described so carefully and meticulously that it's like I don't know if I can really describe it in my own words very well. So then they must have gotten back in their boat. Rat, who was in the stern of the boat, while Mole Scold sat up suddenly and listened with a passionate intentness. Okay, so now it becomes clear that Rat has heard something. What is he hearing? And it's very, very beautiful. And he's like, Mole, what is that? And Mole hasn't heard anything yet. But Rat says, okay, keep going, keep going. the music is calling to us. So Mole doesn't know what it is, but he just keeps rowing. And he's like, I hear nothing but the wind playing in the reeds and rushes and osiers. So basically, they're hearing something. They're hearing this music. It's sort of unearthly. It can't be placed. It's just, it's, as they say, it's an intoxicating melody. It's, it's, it's heavenly music. It cannot really truly be described, but it really is the wind in the willows.
Yeah.
It's all of nature singing its beautiful song that you can't really copy or describe, but it's there and it's calling to them, and they're feeling it down to their bones, I think. And it talks about how it like perks up all their senses. They notice these things that they'd never noticed before, the herbs and the colors and the smells, everything's so vivid and pervading. There's foam and glinting lights and shining shoulders of green water. And they finally land for sure, and they push through blossom and scented herbage and undergrowth. And they climb out onto this little lawn of marvelous green. And Rat says, this is the place of my song dream, the place the music played to me. And here in this holy place, here if anywhere, surely we shall find him. And there's all these capitalized words through there. So we understand that they're talking about a godlike creature, right? Somebody that deserves, when they use the word him, awe, presence, they capitalize all those
Yeah.
words to let you know that they're talking about someone in particular. It's a proper noun, right? And usually that's what we do when we're talking about deity. And we understand that it is the nature god, Pan, who I believe is sort of the god of the animals, and he plays his pipes. And that's why it's significant that in the beginning the chapter's name is what is it? Pipes of something. The piper at the gates of dawn. And it's like the middle of the night. It's right before dawn, and they come across Pan, who also happens to be holding this baby otter in his arms. And so they're able to rescue little Portly and take him back. And I love this because Mole is like, are you afraid? And Rat says, afraid? Afraid of him? Oh, never, never. And yet, oh, Mole, I am afraid. And I love this. Then the two animals crouching to the earth bowed their heads and did worship. And after a little while, like the vision vanishes. But I wanted to talk about that for just a minute because we've just been studying, we're just past Christmas, but also in our family scripture study, we're studying about the birth of Jesus Christ. And what do the angels say to like everybody that they come to?
Fear not.
Fear not, right? And it's like they're not afraid, but they kind of are afraid, you know?
Yeah.
It's almost like there's these senses inside them telling them they don't need to be afraid, but their mortal, brains are telling them, do be afraid because you don't know what this is. But there's part of them that's like, you don't need to be afraid. But I love that. It's like when you're in the presence of deity, you have this sense of peace, but also this sort of underlying fear.
Yeah. Because it's like an unknown.
It is.
Like, and what I think is funny is I don't know, like okay, how do I explain this? In like your studies or you're learning about God, you kind of have this fear of him, right?
Yeah.
But there's been a couple of times in my life where I've felt something different. Like if I had an experience where I felt kind of God's love, and it's not like that at all.
Yeah.
So it's like this amazing feeling inside that you want. To me, it doesn't happen very often, like
Yeah.
this caliber of an experience, right? But like
Right.
when it does, it's like you feel his love so much that you're like, how can I feel that again? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like something you can't seek because I think it's a gift. But then you just remember, I don't know. It's like when you're actually feeling his love, it's like this. I'm not afraid. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
And you're like not afraid of anything,
no.
really.
Yeah.
And but it is, I think that it can be very intense to where it's like, it's hard to think about anything outside of that, which is kind of how it's probably supposed to be. But I don't know how we would function all the time if we were like feeling it so
That's true.
intensely like that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Although we can always know that God loves us and feel that love, but maybe not always so intensely.
Yeah.
But I
That's what I
think
was
those
thinking is
experiences are important.
we kind of feel it all the time, but like
Yeah.
there's times like this where it's like intense and you can't deny it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, yeah, I don't know. He
Yeah.
does love me and there's no reason to be afraid. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And then I also love at the going back a little bit when they hear the music and he said, and Mole looks over at Rat and he's has tears.
Yeah.
And I think about that, like I'm a musician, and sometimes with music, there's these moments where like you connect with your instrument in such a like spiritual way that, or like you enter a room where there's music being played and you immediately feel that emotion and have
Mhm.
tears. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Yes. Well, I agree. I think that you can absolutely feel that. I think especially with music, but I feel like I've sensed that even during a play or reading an
Yes.
incredible book or ballet, or like there's so many instances, but I think it's like when we experience excellence, we experience people like getting very close to God and God-like, and that is very spiritual. And maybe the people themselves don't necessarily even believe in God. I don't know, but I think it's like it is experiencing just the very, very best that someone has to offer. And since that is what God asks of us, to put forth our very best, then it makes sense that we would feel that spirit so strongly when we experience that.
Okay. Excellence. That is what makes these classics, is when we're reading them and like we're kind of having that experience that you're talking about because of the excellence in the literature and the writing. And yeah, that's why
Yes, 100%. I love that. And I think that's true. So true. And I think that really, it may not, maybe a lot of people don't necessarily recognize that, but I think that that is truly what makes a classic is it is excellent.
yep.
It's an excellent story. It's excellent execution, excellent thought and observations behind it, and excellent thought provocations that come because of it. And it's just everything
Yeah.
about it. Just so wonderful. So basically for the rest of this chapter, it just talks about how they sort of experience some forgetfulness. Like they
Yes.
had this incredible, just powerful and uh impactful experience, and then they experience some forgetfulness about it. But they talk about it being, Mole says, I feel as if I had been through something very exciting and rather terrible, and it was just over, and yet nothing particular has happened. And Rat says, or something very surprising and splendid and beautiful. They still hear the music, though, in the reeds. It's far away now, but they still can hear it and they still love it. And they do deliver little Portly
Yes.
back to his family, and that's wonderful.
They don't
But
even like really, they just kind of like drop him off on the bank and watch him run to his dad and they
yes,
make sure they connect and then they're off. It's
yes,
just funny.
yeah, yeah, really sweet. It's like they're not looking for any praise or anything. It's like, here he is. Uh, but they hear, like I said, they keep hearing the music, but Rat can actually hear words, which I think gives you even more of a clue of what kind of a guy Rat is. And Mole's like, I can't hear the words. And Rat says, let me try to give them to you, which I think is like, wow, so so deep and powerful. When someone can hear the words of and understands the way that God speaks to them, like they kind of have this desire and this duty to pass it on to those who maybe can't hear it as well. So here's the words. He says, it says, lest the awe should dwell and turn your frolic to fret. You shall look on my power at the helping hour, but then you shall forget. Forget, forget, lest limbs be reddened and rent. I spring the trap that is set. As I loose the snare, you may glimpse me there, for surely you shall forget. Helper and healer I cheer, small waifs in the woodland wet. Strays I find in it, wounds I bind in it, bidding them all forget. Anyway,
Yes,
so
so good. Well, then Mole says, what do those words mean?
yeah,
Rat's like, I don't know.
I don't know. I just pass them on to you. And, but then there's silence, and it says, with a smile of much happiness on his face and something of a listening look still lingering there, the weary rat was fast asleep. So they've had this incredible experience, this incredible night, and it has exhausted them, and now they're ready for sleep. So
Yes. So now we're back to Toad.
yes.
And this, I think, is the chapter where we're going to talk about like the animals and the people seem to be the same size
Right.
because a lot of this would not make sense. So Toad is miserable being in his dungeon of a prison. He just is not happy. And he says that he hopes that, let's see, he hopes that wise badger and intelligent rat and sensible mole will not forget him while he's in there. And he now wishes he had listened to them and followed their
At least
intervention,
that's what
right?
he says.
Yes.
He's very repentant when he's in trouble.
Yes. Well, at this point, being in the dungeon, he's like, yeah, I wish I would have listened. So he won't eat. He's refusing meals, but then the jailer points out that he could get extra stuff because he has
He
money.
has money, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the jailer's daughter loves animals. She loves pets. And so she thinks Toad is probably awfully cute. And so she asks if she can watch over him. So she brings him dinner. He refuses it. She brings it in and he's smelling the food. And at first he's refusing it. But then he says, the air of the narrow cell took on a rosy tinge. So I was like, is he looking at things now through more rose colored glasses? Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, and it starts him thinking about things that are at home, like the clink of dishes at Toad Hall and the scrape of the chair legs on the floor as everyone comes in to eat. And anyway, so it's just kind of bringing him back home. So finally, I think she keeps bringing him food, and he eventually he'll eat. He talks himself into eating, right? So he talks to the jailer's daughter about himself and how important he was. She asks him about his house because she's heard that it's grand. She avoids telling him that she likes to keep animals for pets. I think that's kind of funny. And once he's like kind of talking about himself again, he's back to his old self.
Totally. And what I think is funny, first of all, he's really talking up Toad Hall. She's like, I don't want to buy it. Just
Yeah.
tell me about it. Yeah. But also he's like, he regrets that the social gulf between them is so very wide. For she was a comely lass and evidently admired him very much.
He
He
thinks she's
thinks
in
that,
love with him.
well, he thinks she's in love with him, and he thinks that he is so much better than her.
Oh, I took
Like,
it the other way around.
oh, you think?
But I don't know. I could be
I
wrong.
think just based on like everything up to this point,
It's true.
I think that he thinks he's so much better than her. And that's the social gulf. It's like, you're a jailer's daughter, and
Okay.
and later on, the way that he talks about her aunt, he's like, oh, it's okay that you have an aunt that's a laundress.
That's hilarious. Yes, you're right. So, yeah, she says, I have an aunt who's a washerwoman. And oh, that's so funny. He says, well, I have several aunts who ought to be washerwomen. And she's kind of like, well, be quiet. I'm trying to tell you something because he keeps like interrupting her. And, anyways, she says, okay, I have an aunt who's a washerwoman. She does all the washing for the prisoners in this castle. Now, she has this idea. She's like, we could get her to bring you some clothes, a bonnet and a dress and an apron, and you could walk out just like you're a washerwoman. And he's offended because she says, well, you guys kind of have the same figure. He's like, no, we don't.
He's like, I have a great figure for what I am.
Yeah. And so then she yells at him for being proud and ungrateful. Like, I'm trying to do something for you here. And all you can think about is my figure is fine. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And like, you're better than my aunt. She's a washerwoman. Like,
yes. And she also mentions that the aunt is poor and he has money, and she thinks that a few pounds might convince her to do this. And so he agrees to meet with her, and then the aunt is told ahead of time what is going to happen, that what they want her to do. And so she comes into the cell, and he has all of his gold coins laid out. And so they exchange, right? She hands over the stuff, but she wants to be bound and gagged because she doesn't want any kind of she's like, this situation looks bad and I don't want to lose my position here. Right. So we're going to pretend like this just happened to me. And Toad is actually happy with the situation too. He's delighted with the suggestion. It would enable him to leave the prison in some style and with his reputation for being a desperate and dangerous fellow untarnished.
Yeah.
And he was readily helped the jailer's daughter to make her aunt appear as much as possible the victim of the circumstances over which she had no control. So yeah, he's the powerful one here. So they get him dressed up in the dress, and the girl laughs because he actually looks like her aunt, which is like, really? There's no way he looks like her aunt.
I know. I guess I kept envisioning like this green toad face poking out from like a bonnet. And I'm like, oh my God.
Like fooling everybody.
The poor aunt.
Right. So, and she reminds him as he's leaving, like, you have to remember to stay in character. You are
a washerwoman.
Yes, a woman. So he's surprised by how easy escaping was. He's irritated by the jokes and stuff that are made as he's leaving. Like, each person he gets by, they're making these stupid, clumsy jokes, and he's irritated, but he's like, oh yeah, I'm trying to escape. I have to keep my character.
Right.
So he just keeps quiet. Once he gets out, he's like, I got to move quick. The further away he gets, the less likely it's going to be that he's recognized. So he finds a train. It's going in the right direction. And he goes to buy a ticket, and he realizes that he had left all his money in the cell in his waistcoat. And now he has a dress on with no pockets and no money. So now he's just like all the other animals there. His pocketbook, money, keys, watches, matches, pencil case, all that made life worth living, all that distinguishes the many-pocketed animal, the Lord of creation, which is him, from the inferior one-pocketed or no-pocketed productions that hop or trip about permissively, unequipped for the real contest. So yeah, he's just like everybody else. So he asks the clerk to just let him go. And he's like, I'll send some money tomorrow. And the clerk's like, yeah, I'm not dumb. I'm not doing that. Yeah. And then he calls him a woman, and then another guy calls him a woman, and that makes him mad, even though that's what he's going for.
I know.
So Toad leaves the ticket booth crying, and he's like, this is going to end, and I'm going to get stuck back in the prison. This is the end of my adventure. And so the engine driver comes up to him and says, what's wrong? And the Toad says that he's a washerwoman and he needs to get home to his children, who must be playing with matches by now.
I know. I love that little detail. I'm just sure they're at home playing with matches.
Must be. And so the engine driver's like, oh, you're a washerwoman? Like, if you'll wash a few sheets for me, I'll put you in the engine and take you. And so Toad had never washed a shirt. And so he's like, when I get home, I'll just send him a bunch of money back that'll pay for a bunch of shirts to get washed.
We actually had like decent intentions as far as that was concerned. Like,
true.
Yeah.
More than you would think of from Toad. The train leaves, and as they're leaving, he's Toad is acting a little funny. And the engine driver is kind of like, he's not really acting like a washerwoman. Like he was getting excited about getting home and dancing around and stuff. Anyways, so then the Toad notices that the engine driver's looking out the window behind him and kind of has a funny look on his face. And he says, "What's going on?" And the engine driver says, "I think there's a train chasing us. And there's some weird people on it. Like, let's see, ancient, like policemen in helmets. There's a bunch, there's a lot of stuff here, but like
Yeah.
warders, halberds, what I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is? Oh no, that's what they're waving.
But they're waving. Yeah.
Yes. So there's police and all these other people
Right.
on this train, and the train is gaining on them. And then so Toad confesses like this who he actually is.
I am a toad.
As if I don't know. I don't know how he fooled. I mean, this
But
is
I
right.
love what he said. He's like, the well-known and popular Mr. Toad, a landed proprietor. You should know who I am. I'm known for my daring and cleverness. Bro, that's how he escaped from his loathsome dungeon.
Yeah.
So funny.
I got out. So the engine driver's like, I should probably give you up. But especially because he tells him what he'd done and why he was in prison. And he's like, I don't even like cars. So I should probably just turn you in. But he hates the police so much that he's like,
Yeah.
I'll help you.
And he hates that they're chasing his train. Like, I
Yeah.
think that really drives him crazy.
So the engine driver comes up with a plan. He's going to drive through this tunnel as fast as he can. The other train is going to slow down when he hits the train tunnel because they're afraid that they're going to get in a train accident, right? And
right.
once he's out of the tunnel, he's going to slow way down so that Toad can jump off. And then once Toad's off, he's going to speed up. The other train's going to come out of the tunnel and think they're chasing Toad. This elaborate plan.
Yeah.
And the plan works.
Yes.
So they do it. He jumps off, and it says that the train slowed down to almost a walking pace. So that's what I was like, how it almost stopped. And he jumps off, and then the train speeds way back up. So the other train doesn't even question that something has just happened. But now he finds himself in the woods, dark, no money, no food. I mean, he's wearing a dress. I don't know if that matters, and it's late and he doesn't know what he's going to do. And so the animals now, just kind of like when they were in the wildwood, if they're frightening him. So
Yeah.
he's a little bit worried. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to like. So I guess that's where we leave him. He's stuck.
Yeah. He
in
is.
the
He's
woods.
stuck. And basically, he just makes himself a little bed out of leaves and goes to sleep. He sleeps soundly all night. He's got to be completely exhausted. That's where we leave him. And in the next episode, we're going to find him having awakened and just being full speed ahead, Mr. Toad at his finest or worst, whichever way you want to look at it. Because, well, we're going to get back to Rat and Mole because, like I said, it's sort of like every other chapter. So we'll talk about Rat and Mole, but then we're going to get back to Toad, and he's got lots more adventures. We don't suddenly go, okay, leave him asleep in the woods. The next time we come across him, oh, he's back home at Toad Hall. No, there's
Yeah.
a long journey back. It's kind of fun.
Hilarious. This has been, I wonder, I'm going to look and see if there's like a movie or a cartoon or anything about this.
I know that there was an animated feature made many years ago. I never actually watched it. I just remember the previews when I was a kid.
Okay, I'll have to look.
So I don't know what it's like, but that would be a fun one to watch. It really
now.
Yeah. So what have you been reading?
Okay.
What do you want to talk about?
I just read The Boy We Made. And it's about an African American family who has a daughter and then a son, and like he has all these health problems and they can't figure it out. Like basically his blood sugar will like randomly drop dangerously low, and then he like can't talk to them, and he's like totally out of it. They'll take him to the hospital. They don't know why his blood sugar drops, and then eventually it's like not his blood sugar, but he's having seizures, and it's just really interesting. He eventually gets diagnosed with autism.
Hmm.
They do a ton of genetic testing to try to figure out what it is he has. And through the genetic testing, they find out that the mother carries that. And now that it's been a couple days, the gene for like ovarian and breast cancer.
Hmm.
And so she ends up having a mastectomy because
Okay.
like they tell her she has like it's a huge percentage
Yeah.
chance of getting it or something. And so she's like, he saved me, basically,
Yeah.
like all this genetic testing and stuff. So it's just really interesting. A lot of it is like, they feel like Black people don't get the same medical care. Like when they go in, I don't know. And like at one point, she has a Black doctor, and she expects more out of him than he gives her.
Hmm.
Anyway, so it's just kind of that angle. So
Yeah.
not only are they're trying to get people to take them seriously. And so what they do is they bring him in, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with him. And she's like, yeah, there is. And it's funny because, I'm diabetic, and now we have, like, right now I'm wearing a monitor on my arm that tells me what my blood sugar is all the time. And
Hmm.
like my phone beeps if it's too low.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, this has had to be several years ago. I mean, what a blessing that would be for them now,
Yeah.
because they worried because it would always happen in the middle of the night.
Hmm.
So like if it dropped too low and they didn't catch it,
Yeah.
it could be too late. So
Yeah.
yeah, the
Wow.
medical
Yeah.
advances are amazing. It was very good. I listened to it in one day.
Oh,
So
wow. Who's
I
the
like it.
author?
Oh yeah, I could tell you that. Taylor Harris.
Okay.
And I'm reading it. There's this lady I follow called, her Facebook group is called like the Mom Advice Book Club.
Okay.
And she does a podcast called Book Gang. And so she comes out with a book every month that she's
Hmm.
like she does a book club. And that was her
Hmm.
January book. And it was available
Okay.
on Hoopla. So I was like,
Cool.
do it. Not one I would have found anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Oh my gosh. I love Hooplas.
I know.
So,
Such a
uh,
blessing.
it really is.
Okay.
So, well, so I'm going to talk about one that you talked about not very long ago. Running for My Life by Lopez Lomong. I love it so much. There have been so many times I'm listening and I'm just like sobbing my eyes out. It's another one of those listening to it while I'm running on the treadmill. I'm just like, "Ah." So, so good. And I feel like you kind of gave a pretty
Yeah.
good synopsis of it last time, so I won't go into it very much, but just highly recommend. It needs to be out there a lot more. It's such an incredible and inspiring, tragic yet very uplifting story. Like the beginning is very tragic, but and the thing is, like so many of the things are still going on, but it's also very inspiring and uplifting, and I love it. And it actually showed up in the mail today, and so I started reading it aloud to my kids today. I
I
was like,
wonder,
this is
it'll be
happening.
interesting to see if they like it. I mean, they
Well,
will.
so far they do. I read them 2 chapters and I had to stop because I needed to get dinner on and stuff before we started doing this. But a couple of them were like, no, next chapter. I mean, but the first couple of chapters are pretty like, oh,
Yeah.
like pull you right in. So,
Like
but
normally, okay, so when I'm driving for work, sometimes if I'm going to the coast or whatever, or I'm going through the mountains, I'll lose service for a little bit.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I'm listening to a book and I'll lose it. And so I'll switch to Spotify and listen to music that I have downloaded for just a little bit or something. And
Sure.
this time when I was listening to that a couple weeks ago, I was like, I would lose it. I'd be like, no. Like, normally I don't have that reaction,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm like, I need to know what's happening now. I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
So good.
But yeah, that was an excellent book that I think should be reading. High school classes should be reading.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like 100%. So,
Yes.
so good.
Okay. So yeah, we already talked about what we're doing next week. We're finishing up. So
Yeah, I don't think we did talk about it. So yeah. Oh yeah.
we did
Kind of
briefly
like what we're going to be getting into. So yeah, it'll be
the last 4
chapters 9 through 12, which will be wrapping up the whole book.
Yep.
So that'll be fun. And then we'll talk about other books that might go with it and a little more about the author.
Yep.
And yeah, so it'll be really fun.
Okay. We're so happy you joined us for this episode. We hope you will join us next week as we discuss chapters 9 through 12 of The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. If you have suggestions for books we should read and discuss, please email us at thebestbookspodcast@gmail.com. We would love it if you would leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts and share our podcast with your friends. We want to inspire and encourage as many people as we can to read out of the best books.
As Thoreau says, read the best books first, or you may not have a chance to read them at all. See you next week.